Eskow. And one of the silver linings in the enormous dark cloud that is the Trump era has been the rise of women as an ever increasingly powerful political force in this country, starting with the Women's March and moving on from there, including the extraordinary results we have seen for women in the primaries thus far this year around the country. So here to talk to us now about that and about her new book is Kristin Rowe-Finkbeiner. Kristen is the executive director of MomsRising.org, which is a nonprofit national organization dedicated to supporting policies that support family economic security. She's also the host of a program on We Act Radio, Breaking Through, and she is the author of a new book entitled Keep Marching. Let me make sure I get the subtitle right. Keep Marching, How Every Woman Can Take Action and Change Our World. And she joins us now. Kristen, thanks for coming back on the program.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us, well, tell me anyway, let's start with that. What inspired you to write this book?
Well, I was inspired by the women throughout our history who have changed our world for the better, and also by the women recently who've been standing up, speaking out, taking action, really doing things like protecting health care for 30 million people twice, and making sure that our voices are heard and that we move our country toward being a reflective democracy where our policies, our programs reflect our contributions, reflect who we are, reflect our needs, and work for everyone. So I'm excited that the book Keep Marching is out. A lot of people are using it as sort of a handbook. It has lots of policy areas. So it starts with sort of how to get involved. And at the end of each chapter, there are to-dos and tasks and details on how you can have an impact. And then also each chapter covers a different issue area. So it also explains a lot of what's going on.
So, okay, so let's talk about that for a second. So what are some of the chapters suggesting that people do?
Well,
Women in particular.
At the very beginning, looking at where we are now and why we need to have an intersectional movement where we acknowledge and support that there is no gender justice without racial justice and without economic justice. And so then it moves right into a chapter on fair pay that the Ms. Magazine actually just did an excerpt of yesterday. So if people want to read it, you can find it on Ms. Magazine right now. And that shows how we're seeing the impact of gender justice, racial justice, and economic justice being intertwined on the actual paychecks of women. We can see, for example, that women of color experience extreme wage hits, while women are still experiencing wage hits overall of all races. Women of color experiencing extreme wage hits on top of that. And moms of color are also experiencing extreme wage hits. So you can really look at the theory of change and the theory of why we need to be united together and the practice and the impact of what happens when we're not, which is different impacts on different groups of people around one core issue. And then we move into really looking at wealth inequality, what's going on in our economy, where there's job growth, and why that's hitting women the hardest. Women are 2/3 of minimum wage workers, and that's the area of the highest expected job growth in our economy. And so when we don't have workplace protections, when we haven't addressed wealth inequality, we really impact women and families the most. And so there's a whole chapter on that that's very exciting. I think they're all exciting, of course. We also look at the glass ceiling. That's another chapter. And I love that chapter because I actually wrote it before the rise of the Me Too movement, which of course was started over a decade ago. But that recent rise of the Me Too movement. And I found when I was doing research that the harassment that women are experiencing, the daily, regular harassment and sexual assault that women are experiencing is part of what's making the glass ceiling bulletproof. So we examined both of those. And then, I won't tell you the whole book, Richard. I would love to tell you the whole book, but we'll pause for conversation. But then we talk about how only 10% of women in our country are even getting into a room with a glass ceiling in the first place, because only 10% of women are making $74,000 or more a year. And so really the rest of the book covers the 90% of us who aren't.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great point, Kristen, and I think that's so important. I mean, there's a fair amount of conversation about the glass ceiling and breaking the glass ceiling is so important, and I'm fascinated by your statistic about the $74,000, but there are so many women out there for whom the issues are somewhat different. The issues of working women who are making minimum wage, which isn't enough. You know, there's a study showing that if you make them work full-time at the minimum wage in this country, you can't afford a two-bedroom home anywhere in the United States, not in any single county in the United States. That affects working moms, single moms, and I'm so glad you mentioned workplace protections, because you have a situation now in this country where so many working moms, so many they're working in the service industry where their bosses won't even tell them from day to day what shift they might be working on Thursday or on Saturday. How can you get childcare if you don't know when you're going to be working or for how long? So I love the fact that you're approaching this from a two-pronged angle like that. So tell us a little bit more about the book. I know I'm not going to make you go through the whole book, but tell us a little bit more about it, if you would.
I would love to go through the whole book. It's so much fun to talk about because, you know, when we have each chapter, we talked a little bit about the policies, but at the end of each chapter, there's things like how to make an effective meeting with your member of Congress to change their mind, how to tell your story with power, how to bring people together and organize in a way that's inviting and fun. You know, how to believe in yourself. The first rule of organizing is to believe that you can win. So how do you find that belief in yourself? How do you find what you care about? How do you find where you're going to take action and with what groups? And so those kind of things are at the end of each chapter, including one of my favorites, how to run for office, and also how to support people who are running for office, because not all of us can run for office, but all of us can support somebody who's running for office. So those are at the end of the chapters. And the chapters themselves talk about the things that we're facing every day, like the fact that childcare costs more than college. And there's one chapter that I really love. I love all of them, but that's about the domino effect that women face when they have a baby. You know, you have a baby in a country where we don't have paid family medical leave. We're the only industrialized nation in the world. 177 countries have this policy. We don't. So we're having these babies off these fiscal cliffs, and having a baby is one of the leading causes of poverty spells. And then we hit the wall of childcare, which now costs more than college. And we talk a lot about the college crisis in our country. We don't talk as much about the childcare crisis. So we talk about that, and then that rolls into actually another crisis that we have, which is the cradle to prison pipeline, which is enormously huge and facing so many families in our country. We have the highest incarceration rate in the world, and that path starts so young, and there's so many things we can do to stop that from happening, that cradle to prison pipeline.
You know,
and so what I love about the book is we talk about the problems, then we talk about the solutions, the policy solutions, the cultural solutions, and then we have at the end of each chapter how you, specifically you, can actually make a difference and make change. So it's been really gratifying to hear a lot of people have been already using it. And I just want to give a giant shout out to the entire Moms Rising team. I put a lot of the winning tactics and the theories of change and the policies that our members prioritize into the book. So it's really a team effort book, and the Moms Rising staff team who have really used these tactics to win city, county, state, and federal policies are such a big part of the book too. So thanks to everybody who helped with it.
And I really appreciate the fact that you talk about how to give women the confidence to speak, because one of the things that I get in my conversations with women who get into activism is that a lot, you know, and for me as a man, I haven't been sensitive enough to it. I think is the way our culture has subtly discouraged women from speaking their minds. So I love the fact that you're applying a counterforce to that, as well as addressing so many of the issues that need to be addressed. So we have about 30 seconds left. Kristen, what do people need to know in order to convince them to go buy your book?
I have the book. It's called Keep Marching. It's getting great reviews. You can look at some of the reviews on Amazon or Barnes & Nobles or any of those places. I hope you pick it up. I hope you write in the margins about the things you like and that you don't like. I hope that people use it and pass it on like a baton to other women so that we build a huge movement that creates the nation we all know is possible when we all raise our voices.
All right. Well, my guest is Kristin Rowe Finkbeiner. She is the head of MomsRising.org. She is the host of Breaking Through, and she is the author of the book she was just holding up, Keep Marching, How Every Woman Can Take Action and Change Our World. So, Kristen, as always, great to talk to you, and thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you.